That is just such an amazing introduction beat. I'm really jealous of that production value. Also, who cares how many F triple something starring genders there are? Well, you. And I care that you care, and that you're trying to claim that you don't. Because you're in a video saying that you don't care, which means you're caring about it.
Cis people across the internet have just discovered the concept of multiple gender identities, and recently they've been flooding my feed with their hot takes about how there are only two.
So every cis person has found out about multiple genders at exactly the same time. Just everywhere. It's blown up just now, and as a result, you personally are getting what? Assertions of there being two genders. Specifically genders, not sexes, genders. Well, these people are slightly misinformed, probably by people like yourself, who are trying to claim that everyone is saying there are two genders, as opposed to two sexes.
For some reason, they've convinced themselves that this is a new and unique conversation that requires their input.
And what you're saying in response is that anything to do with transgendered issues has absolutely no need for any cisgendered input. Which is, of course, much more reasonable.
I've been tolerating their 4th grade biology lessons for a while now, and frankly...
Please make note of the use of the words tolerating and also 4th grade.
It's adorable that they still cling on to them.
Make note of the word adorable.
Despite what actual biologists and geneticists have to say about the issue.
Okay, Kat, I'm listening. What do actual scientists and biologists have to say about the issue?
It's almost like it's not really about the science as much as it is confirming your bias and making excuses for your transphobia.
I don't want to have any excuses for my transphobia. None at all. Please tell me what I've got wrong.
I mean, it can't be transphobic if it's science. I mean, if there's one thing we know, it's that science has never been used to justify the oppression of marginalized minorities.
So the scientists that did those atrocities weren't known as real scientists at the time.
The thing that I love the most is their sense of self-importance that's convinced them that these conversations are productive, that they're really doing anything more than reinforcing the average cis person's opinion that there are only two genders.
And biologists and geneticists are saying what exactly? You've placed a lot of importance on this.
As I alluded to earlier, these aren't new arguments by any means. In fact, in my over 10 years on YouTube, I've had this debate. I did it way back in 2007, and a decade later, cis people still have the same exact arguments, conclusions, and talking points.
Yes, Kat, you are a trans female. Yes, you have been a trans female for more than 10 years. Yes, you have been vocal about trans rights for more than 10 years.
But these conversations feel different to me because I'm a different person. For a very long time in my life, I lived in a way where I essentially needed for cis people to validate and co-sign my gender.
Yes, you have had this discussion on gender over and over and over.
When you're trans, you live in a world where you're surrounded by people who don't understand you, ultimately disagree with who you are, and genuinely believe that they have the authority and ability to deconstruct and redefine your gender.
Because you keep saying the words two genders
based solely on how they feel about it.
Instead of saying the words two sexes.
You also live in a world where if you're a trans person seeking legal or medical care, you often have to appeal to a cis person's vision of gender.
It's literally the fact that gender is something which you can define by a bunch of different meanings.
Some states still require top or bottom surgery in order to get your gender marker changed, because getting breast implants proves that you're a woman.
you can define your gender partially by something that you wish to identify as. I know of a person who identifies as a cat. Not with the name cat like you have. They are a person who is a cat. Yeah? That's their gender. It's cat. But the sex of that cat is male.
There's a power dynamic that's established for transgender people where we often learn not to see ourselves through our own eyes, but rather through the eyes of a cis person.
If you are a trans person, there is still a sex applied to your gender, even if the sex that is being applied to your gender is a deliberate leaving out of sexual terminology. If your gender is non-binary, by using the term binary, you are referring to the two sexes. But your gender is not sex-based. In order to have gender, we must have sex. But in order to have sex, we don't need to have gender.
The more you appeal to a cis person's rudimentary understanding of
A
gender...
cis person's rudimentary understanding of gender. Kat, you're being insulting. You're saying that all cis people of the same groupthink, and that groupthink is ignorant. That's what you're saying. Does that, or does that not, count as gaslighting an entire group of people just for not having the same experiences as you, rather than their actual ability to understand concepts outside their own frame of reference? Which is a problem that some people have, Kat. Some specific people have it very, very badly.
The easier your life gets. Knowing this, in the past, a lot of these debates and conversations felt personal to me.
Also, it really annoys me, Kat, that you would use your personal experiences in a way which seems to indicate that everyone has experienced this, and which leads people who have no experiences like yours, which is the vast majority of people, to believe that all experiences that fall under the realm of trans experiences are akin to the ones which you are reporting right now in this video. This is cherry picking, this is misinformation, this is misrepresentation.
Because on and offline, cis people would use their denial of my gender as an excuse not to hire me, deny me certain services, and justify why I deserved violence.
I want to give you sympathy for violence done to you because you are a trans person. I'm not going to give you any sympathy for violence which you helped to instigate, or which you just let come about by running your mouth too much so you could then complain about it later. If either of those happened, then apply one of those. Same thing with the jobs. If someone got a job over you despite them being less qualified, you being more qualified, because you are a trans person, I feel really sorry for you. That shouldn't happen. That's illegal. If, however, they were actually better qualified than you, and in order to get over your own incompetence, you're basically blinding yourself to it and saying, transphobia, then go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? So if either of those two things happen, then apply that answer. And don't apply that answer unless one of those two things happened, if you understand my meaning, because I wouldn't want to insult where there's no insult, and I wouldn't want to give sympathy where there is nothing to give sympathy for. The services one kind of confuses me, because I don't know what kind of services get refused to trans people other than possibly, is it bathrooms? In that case, I think I'm completely on your side on this one. Trans people just need to, in terms of public bathrooms, be given the respect of choosing their own gender, and perverts upon the action of being perverts need to be punished for being perverts. But the key word there is action. You can't police thought. You know what I mean? If I go into a public woman's bathroom dressed up as a woman, up until the point that I am actually perving on some women, I'm not actually doing anything properly wrong. Because if I say I'm going into a woman's bathroom dressed up as a woman, like, it could be going into a woman's bathroom with a bunch of female friends who are actually thinking it'll be an absolute hilarious laugh for other women to walk into the bathroom and see me swallow the dictionary dressed full on as, like, you know, Beauty out of Beauty and the Beast, or Little Bo Peep out of Toy Story, or something like that. Just like doing my makeup in the mirror. Because let's face it, you walk into a public bathroom and you're not expecting something that outrageous. That's hilarious. It's not pervy, it's not underhanded, it's just funny. And it's also completely innocent, and it's light-hearted and benign. Same thing, by the way, if I walk into a men's bathroom, even if I'm on my own, dressed as, like, Little Bo Peep or something like that, I can be being a hilarious, like, foil to what you're expecting in there. Or I could be a dude who's happened to dress up as Little Bo Peep, who now needs to go for a piss. You know what I mean? There's absolutely nothing wrong with any of it, and I don't see what the big fuss is. On the other hand, if I was to go into either of these bathrooms dressed up as Little Bo Peep and then try to do something pervy, then I probably deserve every single punishment coming my way, don't I? But at that point, I've done something horrible. Interfered with someone, or threatened them sexually, or something like that. You know? Fucking placed a pinhole camera on something. I don't know. I actually... This stuff astounds me. Specifically because... Yeah, I carry none of this. I'd actually really like to, and I think, like, a whole pile of my friends would probably like to do the stunt that I've just described off the top of my head of, like, the Little Bo Peep thing. I think that'd be hilarious, but probably not going to do it. I don't have a Bo Peep outfit. Where was I?
So their opinion of my gender mattered to me. But then I grew as a trans person and realized that it's actually quite silly for me to believe that a cis person could ever fully comprehend a trans experience.
But that's what you're doing, Kat. You're trying to present as if you are giving a full trans experience, even as you are refuting the claim that any cis person would be able to understand what a trans experience was, by the virtue which you possess, which they do not, of being trans. The real reason why there isn't a single cis person on the planet who will be able to understand fully a trans person's process is because there isn't a single person on the planet who will ever be able to fully understand another person's process.
Like I said, I've been having these conversations for a very long time. While I've moved forward to a different position.
What was your initial position, and in what way have you changed your position in those 10 years with all of those debates and all of those conversations? What is the point that you are coming to? But by the way, what happened to those biologists and geneticists that you were going to talk about as well? Where are they? I haven't seen anything about them. You were going to give me some science which was going to help my transphobia. Remember?
Many cis people are still stuck on their A, B's, and C's.
Struggling with ABCs. The perspective of the, 4th grade biology? The adorable. The words you're using are carrying your own bias. I know this is called In My Opinion by Kat Blaque, which means that you're allowed to carry your bias, but you're only actually referencing that it is your bias with an O in the title. Yeah, In My Opinion is being referenced as an O in your title. It's just, there's the IMOs are not measuring up to the ABCs. You understand?
And from their perspective, the debate about how many genders there are...
The term is sexes. How many sexes there are.
And how valid trans people's identities really are.
Just once. I beg of you, Kat. Just once. Answer the question of how many sexes there are. Because that is what these people are telling you. They are not saying there are 2 genders. They are saying there are 2 sexes. And that in comparison to there being 2 sexes, the issue of what your gender identity is irrelevant.
Is this deep, interesting conversation that often frames trans people as these confused beings who are completely unaware of the realities of being trans.
So the elementary school intellects of cis people are having deep, meaningful conversations which frame trans people as having no idea of what it's like to be trans. This is quite possibly the blindest straw man I have ever heard. Kat, you're framing cis people as not being capable of elementary school thought properly, struggling with their ABCs. And at the same time, you are saying that they are framing all trans people in conversations which these cis people think are enlightening and deep as people who don't understand what it's like to be trans. I'll say it again, that you are telling me that all cis people are having conversations where all trans people don't know what it's like to be trans. And you still look smug.
But in time, I realized that these conversations continue in this way because cis people have this need to own and lead the narrative about trans people.
Cis people do not have a need to own and lead the narrative about trans people.
And this is just an extension of their desire to maintain a power dynamic between cis and trans people.
Cis people need to be allowed to be the natural majority,
where cis people continue to have the power to define who trans people are,
and not have that fact mean they are accused of being tyrannical. It is not anything to do with their actions that they are in the majority. It is to do with their comfort within their own sex, gender, or body type. Okay?
The antithesis to this conversation, of course, is an actual trans person who's lived their life long enough to find these conversations to be pretty basic and honestly quite boring.
I'm sorry. I want to maintain my cis power over your trans experience. And the antithesis to the entirety of all cis people wanting to maintain their tyrannical oppression of trans people is you. Isn't it, Kat? It's your opinions. from your subjective viewpoint. Kat, it's only your opinion that we're tyrannically oppressing you. So yeah, the answer to your opinion is your opinions. I think I've got it. I know how to make these conversations intellectually stimulating and really interesting. I know how to make them a challenge. I know how to modern them up, bring them up to date. We should include the findings of some geneticists and biologists. Like those findings that all of us cis people have been ignoring, that you brought up at the beginning of the video. That would really help to cure our transphobia, Kat. So do you have anything which actually tells us what we're missing in order to be so transphobic? Kat, could you possibly bring in anything at all to illustrate your opinion, Kat?
This is why the trans people who do end up in these conversations are usually trans people who just came out, or trans people who agree with the idea that there are only two genders.
Kat, do you think that there are trans people who believe that there are two genders?
These conversations generally aren't about expanding a cis person's understanding of people who identify beyond the binary of gender.
Trans people who, by dint of going through the process of transitioning, are applying as a third gender, believe that there are two genders. Do they believe that there are trans people and women and not men? Is that what it is? Everyone else is just people, just peeps. Yeah. Because I don't see your logic here at all. To be honest, I do recognise that there are people like Blair White, for example, who have stated that there are two sexes, which is what I'm stating as well, because that's like a scientific fact, Kat. That's not about genderization. It's got nothing to do with it. It's science. And those people who are saying that there are two sexes, you're saying that are saying there are two genders, and you're saying that other genders don't exist. This is... it's utterly ridiculous. I can't get my head around what your head needs to get around to be able to think this bullshit.
Often it's about dismantling trans identities in general. Trans people's lived experiences often contradict cis people's shallow understandings of life as a trans person.
It's not a shallow understanding, Kat. They're called secondary understandings, and they can be very strong understandings if the person who is having a secondary understanding is treating the subject they are trying to understand with respect. Have I lost you?
And I've noticed that cis people would rather tell me about a trans person's life and identity than listen to them speak about their life and identity. One of the first things that most trans people come to understand is that despite the sex they were designated at birth...
I'm sorry, what? Did you just say the sex they were designated at birth? Did you just point out that people are designated as sex at birth? Based on just the doctor's opinion, I suppose. Yeah? I wonder how close to derailing your own argument you're getting at this point.
And the gender they were expected to have because of it, who they know themselves to be, doesn't line up. Very few trans people realize this and decide not to take steps to change that. We are hyper aware of the fact that our bodies are not cis and that there are differences between our bodies and cis people's.
You've just pointed out a little difference there again, between sex and gender. And then you follow it up by saying that trans people are hyper aware that there is a difference in their bodies in comparison to cis people. I'd say this is no more the case than there is a difference between the bodies of two people, if you understand. It's your perception of your body that is the difference, and it is a valid difference, but it is your perception in relation to your body where the difference actually occurs.
This experience leads us to having a vastly different understanding and experience of gender than I believe most cis people are even able to fully comprehend.
Your use of the word comprehend here is laughable. It's trying to go along with that whole adorable 4th grade understanding, stunted intellect thing that you're trying to just subtly push forward onto all cis people and also trans people who disagree with you, by the way. Yeah. It's horseshit. I might not be able to get the full experience-driven understanding of the full scope of the trans experience, because I'm never going to be trans, because I choose not to be, because I'm not trans. I can comprehend it though. I can comprehend the idea because I can extrapolate from similar but not identical issues which I do face about feeling alien in my own body. It has nothing to do with my gender. It has nothing to do with my sex. But I can extrapolate from the discomfort and then apply it to if that discomfort was surrounding those subjects. You have absolutely no respect for anyone who isn't already inside your frame of reference. This is groupthink, and you're groupthink pope.
There's a reason why cis people who are critical of transgender identities often give the hot take of wearing a dress doesn't make you a woman. Their shallow understandings of trans people.
There's that shallow understanding again there, Kat. This time while you're trying to put it on all cis people that they think that transgenderism is about wearing a dress. Or not.
Have convinced them that it's about a dress, that the average trans person isn't trans because of anything more than what clothes they like wearing. Trans people know this to not be true, but because cis people can only have the ability to observe trans people's lives, they genuinely struggle to move beyond that point.
It's not on, Kat. Yeah? We all know it's not about wearing a dress or not, okay? We all know that the people for whom it is all about the clothes have a different label. Especially over here in the UK. I'm not sure about anywhere else in the Western world because, in all honesty, I don't get out much. But in the UK, we have this tradition within the entertainment sphere, which is the transvestite entertainer. You might know of them called that, like, as drag queens, or just as transvestite entertainers, or cross-dressing entertainers. It's been a part of entertainment tradition for pretty much as long as the BBC's been around, to be honest, although I'm not saying that they are intrinsically linked or anything. But I'll just give one example. Eddie Izzard, who is an absolute genius and who I won't hear a bad word said about, is a transvestite. He likes to wear clothes of both genders indiscriminately because he thinks it makes him look amazing. And let's face it, it does. Makes him look amazing. doesn't mean he's transsexual, does it?
It's like an overly confident kid with very limited life experience, believing that he's experienced life enough to dictate to an adult what life is. It's kind of cute in a way, but largely because it's such a limited perspective that's so uninformed that it's adorable that it was presented as fact. I'm sure that there are a lot of cis people listening to this right now who feel awfully condescended to.
Do you know what's not adorable, Kat? What's not adorable is the fact that you keep on putting words in the mouth of all cis people in an effort to try and make cis people think worse of themselves, to give you, specifically you, Kat Blaque, nobody else, specifically you, money. The facts that we present have not been argued against. The things that we actually assert have not been argued against. The misrepresentations of the facts and the things that we assert are being ridiculed, as is our character and our intellectual ability, and you have not addressed a single pertinent point that anybody has brought up to you in detraction from your assertions. Because we're not supposed to do that, are we, Kat? We're supposed to donate, listen, and
maybe my presumptions about who you are make you feel uncomfortable. Well, that's what it's like to live in a society where complete strangers feel that they can negate the entirety of who you are. Imagine living your entire life with people believing that they genuinely have the ability to do this.
Kat,
To write your narrative regardless of what's true.
you're dictating to me what everything about me is. Yes, that is presumptuous. You have justified that, despite telling me that I'm doing it to you when I am not, and telling me that that is not okay. Is there a problem with this line of reasoning? Something about a two-way street, maybe? Does that make sense to you?
My words might be jarring to you because you're hearing a trans person speak without being curated in a way that appeases you.
I do not want to get any concessions from you, nor does any cis person or any person who disagrees with your opinions wish for any concessions from you, specifically sacrificing your principles. We do not want these things from you based off of the idea that we might be some sort of aggressor or tyrant. Okay? Because that's what appeasement is. I'm not your aggressor, Kat. I and the other people who make videos in response to this IMO ing genders thing, and the people who like comment in your comment section as well, who disagree with you, these people are not aggressors. Okay? There's another word that you can use to describe these people. That word is transvestites. No, hang on. That word is detractors. Detractors are not aggressors. Just like transvestites are not transsexuals. You understand? It's a matter of the clothing that you wear. If you wear the clothing of a plasticine or drawn avatar and you speak your mind and you disagree heartily with points that are being made in a video, that is not being an aggressor, because the clothes are all wrong. An aggressor's clothes have a wee swastika on them. Or a feminist frequency badge.
Well, this is what happens when we speak for ourselves.
No, Kat, this is what happens when you speak for yourself. The vast majority of trans people I know don't sound anywhere near this idiotic.
And I've realized that this is often what cis people are most afraid of.
In my opinion, the thing that most cis people would be afraid of would be people like you making them seem like monsters when they have done absolutely nothing wrong. That would seem to be, the thing that would be obvious that cis people were scared of, rather than being able to run the narrative of a trans person's experience. But yeah, that's just my opinion. IMO, eh? BC?
Us owning our narratives and leading conversations about who we are. Not only have I changed since I started having these conversations, but trans visibility has drastically changed.
Kat, you're complaining about those conversations and those discussions, remember?
Back in 2005, we didn't have well-known trans actors or central media figures, and these conversations were relegated to small pockets of the internet that weren't the most accessible to cis people.
You're not supposed to be holding them up as a symbol for actual progress happening.
Now, you can turn on your television and see a trans person.
That kind of detracts from your argument. Like, entirely. It paints them as being something which is necessary.
And this increased visibility has led to trans people having more conversations about expanding their language to be more inclusive of people whose genders don't fall into the binary.
And which need to be given respect. Which I would agree with. And I don't agree with the rest of your video.
What I see is a lot of cis people responding to this increased visibility. They often frame us as this aggressive group of angry trans people who force their lifestyle onto others and write off people who respond poorly as bigots.
If you, as a trans woman, were to ask me, a cis-het male, to sleep with you, not saying you would, because you wouldn't, but if you were to, hypothetically, and I was to, hypothetically, say, no, not in the slightest, you're trans. You don't, no, you are a trans person, I'm not going to sleep with you. Am I being a bigot? It's a question which Riley J. Dennis has attempted to answer. It's a question which a bunch of other YouTube creators are attempting to think about and attempting to give their 2 cents opinion on it. And to give my 2 cents opinion on it, I'm really sorry, have to put up a trigger warning. This is going to be a bit dark. But to point out the logic or lack of logic in this statement, I'm going to replace the word trans person with the word child. If a child was to go up to a cis-het person and say, sleep with me, and that person was to say, no, that adult was to say, no, you're a child. I am not going to sleep with a child. That is ridiculous. Would that be pedophobic?
But what's really happening is some cis people are being presented these conversations for the first time ever, and it's shocking, and it's upsetting to them.
not unhappy with the advancement of trans people.
We've seen time and time again that as marginalized minorities gain footing, even people who argue that they are in theory in support of them often argue that progress is coming too fast.
Or the speed at which the advancement of trans people is happening.
To cis people, especially those who call themselves allies, the idea that there are more than two genders complicates a conversation that they were just beginning to understand.
Very, very happy with that, and I am a cis person.
So an outright rejection of the unfamiliar seems like the easiest thing to do. So even in a situation where a person is deciding for themselves who they are.
And pretty much every cis person I know, and every trans person I know is happy with that, so cool.
Cis people still feel like they have the authority to define them based on nothing more than how uncomfortable it makes them and how confusing it is to them.
What's next? We had it being too confusing.
And the idea that these concepts are new is actually quite annoying.
The only thing that's confusing is why people are listening to you. Like, I can see on the surface why they are. You have a different sexual identity, you have a different gender identity, you come from a minority, racially speaking. There's all these sort of virtue signal tick boxes that are the opposite of what I have, really. Yeah, I can see superficially why, but I don't see why after listening to you for a while people don't sort of recognize that you're really not saying anything. You really aren't. Like, all the things that you're saying are like completely subjective experiences and cannot be refuted anyway, and all the things that you're alluding to that could be refuted and would be evidence that would be able to be looked at is never actually brought to the forefront. And so I find it really difficult to understand why people would be listening to you when you're actually not saying anything that they will find helpful to know. That's very confusing to me. But that's about you, not about trans people, you see? I don't find the idea that trans people exist or that they deserve to be the same as everyone else to be confusing in any way. No. Not at all. I believe they deserve exactly the same rights as everybody else.
I wrote a research paper in both high school and my early years of college.
That's great.
About cultures both inside and outside of North America that not only believed that there were more than two genders, but accepted and revered people who existed outside of the binary.
Someone you should look at if you really like the work on like transgenderism around the world and throughout history. There's a lady called Pamela Stevenson. She's more commonly known as the wife of Billy Connolly, which I suppose you can't really help when you're the wife of Billy Connolly, you know what I mean? It's kind of a world-striding name. But she did a lot of very, very good work on transsexual cultures, to be honest. Very cool. Can't remember any of it off the top of my head, but I've read a fair bit of it, and it is really awesome. I'm actually going to have to go back and read it again. I heartily recommend it.
But a lot of that was destroyed by colonization.
Kat, in 2017, on YouTube, please, in another video, please do describe a colonial mindset. In 2017, on YouTube. What is a colonial mindset? I can understand if it was during sort of like the conquest of India or when the Native Americans were massacred or any of that stuff. I can understand all of that. I can understand where the idea of a colonial mindset might come from. But what this seems to be to me is you telling everyone who disagrees with you on the way you see transgender issues. It's you telling those people who are your detractors that by being your detractors, they are racist. Racist. For not thinking that they are ignorant as shit about trans issues and listening and believing everything you say.
And I guess it's a tall order to ask people to think beyond a colonized mindset.
I don't want any authority over you at all. I don't want anything to do with you, Kat. Cis people don't want any authority over trans people. They don't want to assume any authority over trans people or their narrative or whatever the fuck that means, you know what I mean?
Personally, as a trans person, I've seen way too many trans people detransition because they felt pressured into picking a side of the binary because of their interests.
What fucking authority do we want over you? What do we specifically want to be able to do to you that doesn't resort to using language that's just grind us down, hold us back, no actual specifics? Blah 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 bathrooms, blah 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 armed forces, blah 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 blah. These are nitpicking arguments in comparison to what used to be going on. Recognise the progress, recognise the achievement, and recognise that a shit ton of cisgendered individuals helped that shit go down. A shit ton. Not because it was difficult for them to do, but because they thought it was just normal and right. You know why? Because they're inclusive. And they're for equal rights. And they're for equality. And they're for all sorts of fairness and giving people benefits of doubt. Blah, 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 blah. And you stomp all over that. You do absolutely nothing to help your own case.
Because of that, I'm happy to see more expansive language that helps more people feel comfortable with themselves outside of the pressures of assimilating into a gender.
Do you remember whenever you said you were going to bring up some information from geneticists and biologists, Kat? Well, you've now brought up an authored study. I would say studies, but it is actually open to interpretation that it's one study presented twice at two different institutions. And that the author of that study is you, and the level of study that study was conducted at was high school and college. Yes? Okay. So, we're not talking about someone with a PhD who has studied this stuff for an awfully long time. We're not talking about geneticists or biologists, are we? And you're still not giving any actual information from any of these reports to back you up. You're using them as virtue signals. And what these virtue signals tell me, Kat, is that you've been on this soapbox for the longest time.
I may not understand most of these identities, but I'm very pro people being comfortable with who they are and identifying yourself in a way that makes you happy.
Like, I don't know when the last time you actually listened to someone was.
And I have a hard time understanding how anyone who's truly happy with themselves could be that invested in telling another person who they are.
In terms of, like, challenging your own actual mindset?
I'd like to live in a world that's more accepting of transgender people. And I don't believe that silence makes getting there possible.
When was the last time you listened to Jordan Peterson, for example, you know what I mean? And he's not perfect, but he's a shite ton better than you.
And I don't think that we can get there without having conversations about the language that we use.
How long has it been, Kat? How long has it been since you completed your vocabulary of answers for everyone's questions?
But frankly, as a trans person, speaking to a cis person about these issues feels like speaking to a child. And to be honest, I'm not particularly interested in hearing cis people's opinions on trans issues.
You're so politically correct.
I'm not saying that you can't share your opinion.
I suppose I should be thankful, really, because, like, I have, 6 subscribers?
But it's going to be pretty boring to me, and more often than not, I find conversations about trans people without trans people to be largely unhelpful and unproductive in the long run.
If this video, like, if more people agree with me than agree with you, and I really, really do think they do, then I might actually get some subscribers off this video. So thank you very much for making your video, Kat. Just in case I don't get a chance to say that, really, thank you very much. I will be leaving a link to it in the description, obviously. Also, thank you very much for being a commentator on YouTube. Like, I do actually appreciate that you are out there, putting your voice out there, because it gives me a counterpoint for everyone's opinion that's on YouTube, and everyone provides counterpoints for everyone else. It's actually really helpful. So even though I completely disagree with you, thank you for doing this. And also thank you for putting that beat up there. I've played it something like, I don't know now, something like 100 times. I'm really jealous of your production values.
Again, I've been observing these conversations for a while. We haven't gotten further because two cis people got together to do a thought exercise about how many genders exist. We've gotten further as trans people continue to gain visibility and speak about their own experience.
You are absolutely socially reprehensible.
And cis people listen.
And believe. Right? And not question. Just believe everything that they're told. 100%.
But these lives have existed for centuries, and cis people are still playing catch up. I'd much rather hear two trans people have an inter-community debate than uninformed cis people who only read about these things and for some reason believe that everything about being trans is quantifiable and easy to understand.
You are absolutely gaslighting.
It's not, and it's okay to just not understand something. Cis people who interject into conversations where trans people are speaking about their feelings and experiences often operate from a place of superiority because they believe that the ultimate goal of a trans person is to be cis.
Absolutely gaslighting.
Look, I'll never be cis. And while I'm sure cis people feel like this is a great tragedy,
absolutely gaslighting.
I honestly don't feel that way. There was a time where it did bother me, but I'm pretty content with who I am today.
That's great.
I like myself and I'm not ashamed of my body.
That's great.
Or my gender.
That's great.
There will always be people who misgender me or call me a man because they believe that it's something that bothers me.
That's great.
And those people will likely always exist throughout my entire life.
That's great.
Even as some cis people become more aware of trans issues,
You're so politically correct.
there are people who will always exist that will say these things and feel this way.
So politically correct.
And I'd much rather not spend my life debating with them
So politically correct.
about something that, in 2017, I rarely think about.
So politically correct.
Look, I've been speaking about trans issues for so long that at this point I honestly feel I have very little to say.
So politically correct.
I'm an extremely privileged and cis-normative trans person who,
That's great.
frankly, isn't actually used to being seen as trans beyond the internet and circles where people are familiar with my work.
That's great.
Despite what a lot of people would like to believe, my life doesn't revolve around me being trans.
That's great.
I've made back-to-back trans content for years.
So politically correct.
And I've reached the point where these just aren't the most important conversations for me to have.
So politically correct.
Especially as someone who isn't often seen as a trans person.
That's great.
And in truth, I'm very comfortable with that.
That's great.
There was a time where I sabotaged my YouTube channel and many other things so that I could remain stealth. That's one reason why trans people just sort of disappear. Sometimes we just want to go forward in life without having to discuss trans issues.
So politically correct.
Many of us, because of who we are often placed into roles as leaders and activists when most of us really just want to be able to live life.
Right. I'm not addressing any more of these individually. I've gone from being amused at the beginning of making this video to being absolutely livid angry at the end of it.
However, I realized that my perspective was an important one to share in a world where our narratives are often subverted,
Kat, I think you're dangerous.
where I can tell relatively uncontroversial stories of my life, and they're still met by shock and awe by cis people.
I think you're like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon of yourself. I think if you turned up in Scooby-Doo, we wouldn't notice any appreciable difference visually or character-wise.
Who, for whatever reason, are convinced that trans people are below them and don't do things that they do.
I'm not sure what is going on inside your head.
I could have made the decision to remain silent, withdraw, and completely disappear from these conversations. Frankly, it would have been quite easy for me to do so. Heck, I'd probably live a much less hectic life.
But what I can make out, what seems to be going on with this video is you're setting yourself up to be something.
Instead, I decided to continue to share my perspectives on trans issues so that cis people who are interested in supporting the trans community can get a bit of insight.
With your virtue signaling and with your assertions,
for me, these conversations are no longer personal, so don't take these videos as a defense of myself.
and with the offhanded confidence that you are trying so desperately hard to display.
I will continue to exist whether or not I have the agreement of cis people. In other words, what I'm saying is,
With the animation of your speech and of your body language, with everything, the way you've laid out the video, even like your accomplishments and where they are and the context in which they've been put, everything makes sense when you look at that video from this perspective of just this whole video is trying to literally
be thankful that I'm even speaking to you about these things because, frankly, I don't have to.
be sort of a CD for you to take the mantle of Pope of the trans world or something like that. Pope of the trans world. That sounds like an awesome title. But yeah, you're sort of like accepting it, even though no one's handed you this role, and you're accepting it begrudgingly at that, and that's hilarious, but it's also very dangerous. If people like you have a platform where they can speak as they will and there is no criticism allowed, because the people who would criticize obviously do not have the required life experience to criticize, that's something approaching absolute power. There's a phrase involving that and the word corruption, which shows why I think you are dangerous. You don't want this. You don't want me to do this. Like, there's a good chance that me even doing this is going to result in some sort of brief heightening of my completely lack of any fame, because you will go after me, because you'll get like offended or something. I mean, it's not a high possibility. I'm saying this now, and if you've listened, Kat, if you've listened this far to my video, then obviously you're not going to do anything, are you? Because I've now mentioned this, and you don't want to look weak in and of yourself while you're applying for the post of Pope of the Trans World. You have absolutely no points of relevance. Like, the only real point that you're arguing is that people say there are two genders. And that's ridiculous. People are saying there are two sexes. We've gone over it so many times in this video. And the reason that it's irrelevant is you're making it so. I think that if we're going to be honest, we need people like you on forums like this. And you're right about that. And we should be grateful that you are here, because you do represent something. It's not what you think you represent, but what you represent is still valid and still viable. And we need to be hearing your opinions. But if you think that you're going to get away with voicing your opinions and having total acceptance ever on any platform, no matter what your opinion, because of your virtues as you say them, you're not going to be applicable for criticism and for detraction. If you're going to couch all criticism and detraction as aggression, violence, refusal of service, then you do not deserve to be defended. If you are allowing for absolutely no criticism, you have no defense. You are a cult leader at that point. And yeah, we're just Church of Kat Blaque, eh? If that happens, do you still pay taxes?